The Chicago Bulls are in first place in the East. We're 3/4 of the way into the season. They've had a ton of injuries.
I'm not going to say.
Listen, Tommy. We've mentioned this twice already. This is now the third time I will mention it. I was wrong on the Bulls. I was wrong. You hyped them up last summer after free agency. I was hyping the DeMar MVP conversation very early in the season. I went on ESPN. I hyped it. And I'll say this. To me, there's three guys. It's Giannis, Jokic, and Embiid. Those three guys are on a different tier. But when we talk about a story and we talk about what someone is doing individually, DeMar, Ja, those guys are as good as anyone in the league. And I want to sort of appreciate DeMar because he gets his shit in the mid-range. And we've been talking about the death of that for so long. And as we've seen in the playoffs recently, whether it was Kawhi's run with the Clippers or with the Raptors, Devin Booker and Chris Paul last year, certainly Anthony Davis, Jimmy Butler, like you need guys that can operate in the mid-range in the playoffs. You need guys that can go get you a shot. So much of the playoffs comes down to matchup hunting and creating off the dribble. All the easy stuff, the flow offense, that doesn't always work in the playoffs. In fact, it rarely works in the playoffs. And so you need a guy like DeMar. Look, I'm not going to say the Bulls are this or that, but he makes them a contender in the East. He's that good.
I have a question. Why do you think DeMar should not be in that top three? And I will preface this question with, I understand Jokic's stats are unprecedented. I understand what Joel has done. But between the Bulls being number one in the East at this point at the All-Star break and the amount of adversity they faced in terms of injury and COVID, and Zach has now missed a ton of games, Lonzo's missed a ton of games. It's not like this team has, had an easy ride to get to this place.
Yeah.
We've talked about MVP before on the show, but in this particular case, like DeMar seems to have both, exceptional stats, but also is clearly the most valuable player on, one of the best teams in the league. And like the Nuggets are not the Bulls, right. So Jokic stats aside, the Nuggets are not there.
Well, they're 4.5 games behind the Bulls. If we were to do standings right now, the fact that they've done that with basically their bench unit and Jokic, because they're missing their other two best players. Look, this is not a knock on DeMar, and certainly to your point, narrative matters here. And Jokic won last year. Giannis had won 2 in a row prior to that. Joel was second. So there's an element of voter fatigue whenever we talk about MVP. Michael Jordan, LeBron James, those guys could probably have 2 or 3 more in their career if it wasn't for the fact that narrative does matter. But like individually, to compare DeMar's season to what Joel and really what Giannis and Jokic have done, Jokic and Giannis arguably have had 2 of the greatest individual seasons ever, and their teams are in contention. It's hard to make the argument that DeMar is more of a valuable player than those guys. I was thinking about this earlier today. It should just be the player of the year. We do the coach of the year. We do the most improved of the year, the sixth man. Like generally speaking, there's a very sort of direct correlation between what the award is and how we define the award and then who wins the award. Whereas with MVP, there are just so many different thought processes that voters put into it.
Yeah.
But if we were to say who have had the 3 best seasons in the NBA this year, it's those 3 guys. And then I would put DeMar and John Moran and Steph, even though his numbers, I know his counting numbers are down, but you can't overstate his value to that team and the fact that they're winning. Chris Paul, of course, Devin Booker. I'm sure I'm going to leave a guy out, and somebody from that fan base is then going to tweet at me and say, "What about so-and-so? I can't believe you forgot this guy."
Guaranteed.
It happens every time. But look, I do think we get caught up in these award narratives, and again, we can sit here and say DeMar is the MVP or should be the MVP or is a top 5, whatever. It doesn't matter. Let's just celebrate the fact that this guy who was on a contender, then went to San Antonio. I think they got the 8th seed one year. They were out of the playoffs for 2 years. He continued to master his craft. And now we're seeing the fruition of that on a great team with pieces that make sense. And I think we should just celebrate the amazing season that DeMar has had. Let's celebrate it and acknowledge that he is a great player, a great NBA player.
I think KD said it well. He said, thank you for setting a great example and playing the game with supreme skill.
Supreme skill.
That's it.
Supreme skill. I love it. Let's acknowledge it. Let's give DeMar his flowers. Let's give it DeMar his flowers.